Hey there, and welcome to our section on curves. Now, curves are super cool. They're kind of like the cousin to levels. They're just a little bit more complex, but they work in a really similar way. You can make your images lighter and darker, you can color correct, and you can also color tone using curves. So let's go ahead and start up opening our image. Let's just go to our tools and techniques folder inside of our sample images, and I'm gonna go down to curves.jpg and hit open. Let's hit F for full screen. So to create a curves adjustment layer, same deal like levels, click there and go to curves. Okay, now we're gonna start off with a general overview here, and you guys are gonna see a lot of real similarities to how levels work. Starting with our point here on the left. If I click that little point that's right on the left, so this is a histogram again, if I click this point and start to drag this from the left to the right, you'll notice the dark pixels in my image is going to black. So this is basically just our black point. So just taking this and dragging this from the left to the right, that's our black point. Pretty cool. Now, if I take this point here and drag that from the right to the left, this is our white point. So anything that's lighter than this is now going completely white. Okay, so we have our black point and our white point, similar to how we have on our levels. Now for the midpoint, you can just click here in the middle and drag that up, making your midtones lighter, or drag that down, making your midtones darker. Pro tip, you can just click and drag right off of it and it'll reset. Okay, now as far as your input levels go, okay, remember that's your black point. Okay, everything darker than this is getting black. Now if I take and drag this upwards, then the darkest pixel of my image is getting lighter. So I can then combine these two together, there we go, to create interesting effects. And this is basically combining those two graphs that we had with levels. So left to the right is basically my black point, and up and down is making the darkest pixel in my image lighter. If we go up here, it's just all white. Okay. Same deal with this guy up here. If I go to the left, it's making everything that's to the right of this completely white. And if I come down, it's making the lightest pixel darker. Okay, so you can use these in conjunction and click and drag that in there as well and get something extremely fun just like that. All right, so that's basically how curves work. Similar graph, we've got our histogram here. Here's how curves differ from levels. They get a little bit more complicated because you can actually add more points. So with levels, we just had our black point, our midpoint, and our white point. With curves, you can have a bunch of different points. For instance, if I want to take my highlights and make those brighter, I can do that. But I can also click here and make my shadows darker. Okay, this is an S curve, and it's just adding contrast. Now, that doesn't look horrible. I can continue to go in here and add points if I want to, and we've got a really complex graph, and before too long it's going to start to super degrade our image and we'll get something that really doesn't look that good. Most of the time you are not going to be making this many points on a curves adjustment layer. Just want to show you that you can. Okay, let's go ahead and undo that. Now this is our primary mode here. Okay, this will allow you to click and drag your points. You can also, let's just undo that, choose a pencil mode, which is kind of fun. In which you can actually just draw your own curves if you want. So you can get some really fun stuff just drawing your own curves. You can put like random points in random places. Obviously, most of us are not going to do this, but it just shows you that you really can adjust your image. So you can say, okay, we'll do something like that, a little bit more normal. I don't really use this pencil that much. I find it's more helpful to use this most of the time. Also, with curves, super cool, you've got your black point, midpoint, and white point. So our black point, if I want to make boonk, that's going to be black, and everything darker than that's going to get black too. Let's reset that. Same with our white point. I can make that white. Everything lighter than that's going to get pure white. And we can use our midpoint as well. So our midpoint, I can click right about there. Not only is it going to define our middle gray, but it's also going to help color correct. It's going to reduce the amount of blue wherever I click. If I click on blue, that is. It's going to take the color wherever you click and try to put it to a neutral gray. So it's going to adjust your curves accordingly. So I could click here. I could click on one of these pink. There we go. And it's going to try to push it towards green because you can see her dress has got magenta in it. what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to put more green in my image to compensate, to bring it back to the midline there. That's why if I take my midpoint and I click on magenta, we've got some green, okay? If I click right here on blue, it's gonna go towards yellow, all right? And if I click on yellow, it's gonna add more blue. Okay, so it's just trying to compensate to neutralize and balance out colors, which is cool. Now, the other option that we have here, which I like quite a bit actually, is this little hand tool. So let's click on that hand tool. And then you can increase the RGB. We're in RGB right now, so we're looking at a red, green, and blue at the same time, which just affects lightness. I can increase the lightness or increase or decrease the lightness by clicking on my picture. So if you don't like the whole, oh, I got to use this graph here to work on my picture, then you're going to love this little hand tool, because I can click, for instance, I can click right here and drag that down, and it's just going to make that area darker. Okay, I can drag this up and it's going to make that a little bit lighter. I can drag this down and it's going to make that even darker. It's important to note here that this tool does not know the difference between a wall and the ocean and a person and the sky. It's doing it based on light levels. If it's a similar light level to this, and if I click and drag it brighter, it's going to get brighter. If it's a similar light level to this and I make it darker, it's going to get darker. Okay, so you can see that happening around my image. I can click here and make it a little bit darker. It's basically just going to take my lights and make them a little bit darker. I can click here and make my shadows lighter if I wanted to. Okay, a really helpful tool. Now, up until this point, we've been using all of these tools in RGB, and just like with levels, we can change our color channel. I could go to my red channel, for instance, and use this little guy and click here and say, put more reds over there, and it'll do it. We can go to our green channel. I'll say, put more greens over there now, and it'll do it. We can go to our blue channel and say, reduce those blues, and it will do that. It's going to push them towards yellow. Maybe we can increase our blues in the highlights. There we go. We get something somewhat interesting like that. So we have a lot of control. Obviously, you can use this little hand tool if you'd like. You can make your own points here in the curves if you want to do that. And don't forget about your pencil, which you will almost never use because it just makes all kinds of weird stuff happen. But you basically have all the control that you did with levels here in your curves. It's just a little bit more advanced. You have a little bit more options. All right, so going down, you have a button that will smooth your curves out. That's applicable if you use your little pencil. So you can just make your own little fun thing. How cool is that? You can say, oh, wow, that's so cool. If you decide you want to kind of smooth it out a little bit, click on this button. There we go. And each time I click, it's just going to smooth me out a little bit. It's just going to kind of reduce that effect, which is really nice. And down here on the very bottom, you have an option to, if you just hover over basically anything in Photoshop, it's going to tell you what it does. Calculate a more accurate histogram. So let's click there. And now we have a more accurate histogram that we can work with. That actually doesn't really change anything. It just gives you a more accurate histogram. So you can kind of work having a prettier histogram. So I usually don't do that, but if you want, see, it's gone now because our histogram is perfectly calculated. But other than that, curves are extremely helpful. You can use them for a bunch of different things. Let's go ahead. Let's just do a real quick color correction on this, and then we'll be done with curves. The coloring is not too off here. We just have it's just a bit too much blue over here. So let's go to our midpoint slider. I'm just going to click right around that area and say, you know what, we don't need as much blue there. And you can kind of continue to click around. You don't have to do this once. You can keep clicking around and kind of learn how the tool works. But right about there, we're getting a little bit more realistic, color in our image. Let's go right about there. That looks good. And then, you know what? I'm just make our dark values just a little bit darker. There, we're just looking at like a little bit light. Okay, there we go. And here we have a little bit more realistic coloring. All right, guys, that's it for curves. Next, we're taking a look at vibrance.